The sun was slowly sinking behind the endless plains, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and gold. The wind whispered through the tall dry grass, carrying the scent of dust, wildflowers, and distant campfires. Jackson Hayes rode his horse along a narrow dirt trail, the creak of the saddle and the rhythmic thud of hooves the only sounds in the quiet evening. He was a cowboy who had spent most of his life on the open range, moving from one ranch to another, helping where he could, and avoiding trouble when he couldn't. But trouble had a way of finding him, and tonight would prove no different. Ahead he heard a sharp, desperate cry, a sound that made him jerk his head toward it. His horse whinnied nervously, sensing the tension in the air. Jackson squinted, trying to make out the source of the noise. It was coming from a small clearing beside the trail, half hidden by a stand of twisted oak trees. The cries came again, louder, desperate, filled with pain and fear. Without thinking twice, Jackson spurred his horse forward, galloping toward the sound. As he reached the edge of the clearing, he froze, his heart clenching at the sight before him. A young native girl, maybe no older than 12, was tied to a wooden post. Her small wrists were bound tightly with rough rope, and her thin shoulders were trembling. A cruel-looking man stood before her, raising a leather whip high over his head. The girl's eyes, wide with terror, filled with tears that ran down her dirt-smudged cheeks. Her mouth opened to cry out, but the whip cracked through the air before any sound could escape. Jackson felt anger surge through him, hotter than the sun on the open plains. He could see the fear in her eyes, the hopelessness, the pain. He had seen cruelty before, but something about this, something about her small, scared face made his blood boil. He reached for the man's wrist, grabbing it just as the whip began its downward swing. "Leave her be," Jackson barked, his voice low, dangerous, carrying the weight of someone who had seen enough suffering in his life. The man yelped in surprise and tried to pull back, but Jackson's grip was iron. Who are you?" the man stammered, his bravado faltering. "I'm the one making sure you don't hurt her again," Jackson growled, cutting the ropes that bound the girl with his knife. The girl fell into his arms, sobbing. Jackson's own eyes softened as he held her close, feeling the tiny body shaking against him. "It's okay. You're safe now," he murmured. Her tears soaked his shirt, but he didn't care. He lifted her gently onto his horse, making sure she was secure before turning to face the man. "Get out of here," Jackson said, his voice calm but deadly. The man glared at him, hatred flashing in his eyes, but the fire in Jackson's gaze stopped him. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the trees, muttering curses under his breath. Jackson guided his horse down the trail, the girl clinging to him, still trembling. He could feel the tension in her tiny body, the way she flinched at every sound, even the soft creak of his saddle. "What's your name, little one?" he asked gently. "Ayanna," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's a beautiful name," Jackson said, smiling softly. "I'm Jackson. You're safe now, Ayanna. Nobody's going to hurt you while I'm around." They rode together in silence, the sun dipping lower, shadows stretching across the ground. Jackson could feel her trust growing slowly, like a fragile flower in the desert. When they reached his cabin, a small wooden house with a creaky porch and smoke curling from the chimney, he dismounted and led her inside. The cabin was modest, with rough wooden floors, a small fireplace, and the scent of wood smoke lingering in the air. Jackson offered her a bowl of warm stew and a blanket. She hesitated at first, looking around nervously, then finally sank into the chair and ate slowly. Her small hands trembled as she held the bowl, but she didn't speak. Jackson respected her silence, knowing that trust could not be rushed. After she finished, he helped her into a clean blanket and sat beside her on the floor. "You're safe here," he said again, more firmly this time. "Nobody can touch you. Nobody can hurt you. Not ever again." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different. Not just fear, but a mix of relief, gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite name. She whispered, "Thank you," her voice small but steady. Jackson nodded, understanding that words were enough for now. Night fell and the wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls. Jackson built a fire in the hearth, the flames dancing across the room, casting warm light on their faces. He kept watch outside, sitting in the shadows with his rifle across his knees. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of coyotes, kept him alert. Ayanna slept quietly under the blanket, exhausted but safe. Jackson thought about her life, the cruelty she had endured, and how young she was to carry such fear. He felt a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. Anger at the world that could treat a child so cruelly, sadness for the pain she had suffered, and determination that no one would ever hurt her again. Not while he was alive. As the night grew deeper, he thought about what had brought him here, to this small clearing at this exact moment. Sometimes life had a way of putting people in the right place at the right time, and tonight that place had been right where he needed to be. For Ayanna, the world was suddenly bigger, brighter, and terrifyingly safe all at once. She didn't understand everything Jackson said or did, but she could feel it. The warmth, the safety, the kindness that radiated from him. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, she allowed herself to hope. The stars appeared in the sky, countless and sparkling, as if watching over them. Jackson looked up, the weight of the day pressing on him, but he smiled faintly. He knew this was just the beginning, not just of her journey, but of something that would change both their lives forever. And as the fire crackled, filling the small cabin with its gentle warmth, Jackson and Ayanna settled into a quiet peace, the kind that only comes when danger has passed and hope is newly born. The plains outside stretched endlessly, wild and free, but inside that little cabin, a bond was forming, a bond that neither time nor cruelty could ever break. The morning sun filtered softly through the wooden slats of Jackson's cabin, painting golden stripes across the floor. The air smelled of pine, smoke, and a hint of damp earth from the night outside. Jackson was already awake, moving quietly to the small kitchen to start the day. He needed to feed the horses and prepare the cabin, but his eyes kept drifting toward the corner where Ayanna still slept under the warm blanket he had wrapped around her the night before. She stirred slightly, blinking her dark eyes against the sunlight. Jackson crouched down beside her. "Morning, Ayanna," he said softly. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded silently, wrapping the blanket closer around her small frame. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I slept. "Thank you," Jackson smiled faintly. "You don't need to thank me. You're safe here. That's all that matters." It had been a long journey for her. Jackson knew, even without her saying it, that every step she had taken through life had been heavy with fear. The memory of the whip, the cruelty of the man who had held her captive, still lingered in her eyes like shadows. He wanted her to know that for the first time, she could breathe without fear, that there could be a place in the world where kindness existed. After breakfast, Jackson helped Ayanna to her feet and guided her outside. The cabin's small yard was fenced, offering a sense of security from the wild plains beyond. He handed her a small bucket of water to wash her face, and she hesitated, unsure at first, then dipped her hands in and splashed the cool water on her cheeks. The sunlight kissed her skin, highlighting the dirt and scratches from yesterday, and Jackson felt a pang of sorrow. How had the world allowed someone so young to endure so much pain? "You've been through a lot," he said quietly, as if speaking to himself as much as to her. "But you're strong, Ayanna, stronger than you realize." She looked at him, uncertainty mingling with curiosity. Do you really think so?" "I know so," he replied with a firm nod. "Courage isn't about never being scared. It's about standing up when fear tries to hold you down." Ayanna blinked, absorbing the words. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that before. Most people had looked at her with pity, or worse, with indifference. Jackson's words felt like sunlight breaking through a stormy sky. The days that followed were quiet but filled with small, meaningful routines. Jackson taught Ayanna how to feed the horses, how to sweep the cabin, and even how to mend fences. She was a quick learner, her small hands careful and precise. Her laughter, shy and hesitant at first, began to fill the cabin, a sound that made Jackson's heart tighten with a mix of relief and affection. "See, you're a natural," he said one afternoon, watching her skillfully tie a knot. Ayanna smiled, a genuine, bright smile that made Jackson forget the harshness of the world for a moment. I just want to help," she said softly. Jackson nodded, understanding more than she realized. "Helping others is the right way to live," he said. "It's how we make the world better, little by little." Evenings were the quietest moments. They sat by the fire, sharing stories of the plains, the stars, and the people Jackson had met in his travels. He spoke of faraway towns, of kindness he had received and given, and of lessons learned the hard way. Ayanna listened, eyes wide with wonder, soaking in every word. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, but not all hope is free from shadow. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jackson noticed her staring into the fire, her small fingers tracing patterns on the floor. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. I keep thinking about him," she whispered. "The man with the whip. What if he comes back?" Jackson's jaw tightened. He had expected this fear, and he knew it was valid. "We'll be ready," he said firmly. "And even if he does, he won't hurt you. Not ever again." "I promise," she nodded, though the fear lingered. Jackson reached out, taking her small hand in his. "You're not alone anymore, Ayanna. You've got me. You've got this place. You've got your courage." The next morning, Jackson decided to take her on a short ride across the plains. It was a way to teach her that the world wasn't only cruel, it could be beautiful too. They rode side by side, the wind in their hair, the smell of earth and grass filling their senses. Ayanna's laughter rang out across the valley when a rabbit darted across their path, and Jackson felt a weight lift from his chest. For the first time, the plains felt alive in a way that wasn't dangerous or threatening. As the sun climbed higher, they reached a small stream. Jackson helped Ayanna down to the water's edge. "See, even the world has gifts for those who survive," he said, watching her splash the water with her hands. She looked at him, eyes sparkling with a mixture of joy and disbelief. "You mean, life can be nice?" she asked softly. Jackson chuckled. "It can, but you've got to fight for it sometimes. You've got to stand tall even when it's hard." She thought about the ropes, the whip, the fear that had held her down for so long, and for the first time she believed she could. She believed she could stand tall. That night, back at the cabin, Ayanna helped Jackson prepare dinner. She chopped vegetables with surprising skill for her age, her small hands steady and confident. Jackson watched her, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. He had saved her from harm, yes, but she was saving him too, in a way. Her courage, her resilience, her trust, it reminded him why he had chosen this life, why he had fought through hardships, and why he still believed in the goodness of people. As the fire crackled and the stars blinked awake in the sky above, Jackson and Ayanna sat side by side. The world outside might be harsh, but inside that small cabin they had found something rare, a place of safety, trust, and understanding. Jackson looked at Ayanna, seeing the faintest smile on her face, and felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. He realized then that this girl, small and fragile in appearance but fierce in spirit, had already begun to change him, not through force or words, but simply by being brave, by trusting him, and by showing that even the smallest soul could hold immense courage. And in that quiet moment, Jackson knew that saving Ayanna was only the beginning. Her journey of healing, hope, and discovery had just started, and he would be there for every step, protecting her, guiding her, and learning from her bravery along the way. The plains outside remained vast and untamed, stretching endlessly under the twilight sky. But inside the cabin, in the gentle glow of firelight and the warmth of human connection, fear had lost its power. Ayanna had a safe place to sleep, a place to laugh, a place to grow, and Jackson knew, without a doubt, that some bonds were stronger than fear, cruelty, or time. They were the bonds that made people human, and in moments like these, heroic. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, spilling gold across the endless fields and catching the dust on Jackson's worn boots. The cabin was quiet, save for the soft creak of the wooden floorboards and the gentle snort of the horses in their stalls. Ayanna had been up before sunrise, quietly sweeping the cabin and helping Jackson prepare for the day. She moved with a careful grace, her small hands steady as if she had been born to survive in this wild land. Jackson watched her, feeling a mix of pride and concern. She had been through so much, yet each day she seemed stronger, braver, more alive. He handed her a small bucket of water to refill the trough for the horses. She carried it carefully, the sun catching the beads of sweat on her forehead, and Jackson felt a pang of admiration. This girl was not only surviving, she was thriving. "You're doing good, Ayanna," he said quietly, his voice almost lost in the morning wind. She looked up at him with a shy smile. I want to help. I want to do more." Jackson nodded, recognizing a determination in her that matched his own. "Good, but courage isn't just about work. It's also about knowing when to be careful. Life has its dangers, and we can't ignore them." Ayanna nodded solemnly. She understood the words, but she had yet to see danger in action, not the real kind, the kind that tests everything a person has inside them. Later that day, Jackson decided it was time to teach her how to protect herself. They walked to a nearby clearing where the grass grew tall and wild. He handed her a wooden stick, not as a weapon but as a tool for learning. Sometimes knowing how to defend yourself is the difference between fear and freedom, he said. Ayana's small hands wrapped around the stick nervously. She swung it experimentally, hitting the air with uncertain strength. Jackson smiled. Not bad for your first try. Keep your balance, keep your eyes on your opponent, and remember, you're stronger than you think. Hours passed with Jackson patiently guiding her, correcting her stance, teaching her to anticipate movement. Sweat ran down her face, her arms ached, but she didn't give up. By the time the sun dipped low, her swings were sharper, her stance firm. Jackson nodded with satisfaction. She was learning fast, not just how to protect herself, but how to stand tall in the face of fear. As they headed back to the cabin, Ayana noticed something in the distance, a flicker of movement near the edge of the trees. She froze, her instincts kicking in. Jackson noticed her sudden stillness. "What is it?" he asked softly. I think someone's there," she whispered, pointing toward the shadowed tree line. Her heart pounded, but there was no fear in her voice now, only alertness. Jackson's eyes narrowed. He had been right to anticipate trouble. "Stay close to me," he said. They moved cautiously toward the cabin, keeping their eyes on the movement. Suddenly, a figure burst from the trees. It was the man who had whipped Ayana, his face twisted with rage. He had come back, and he had brought a few men with him. Jackson stepped in front of Ayana, his hand going to the gun at his side. "Get behind me!" he shouted, but Ayana did not move. Instead, she took a deep breath, gripping the stick Jackson had given her. Her small frame was tense, ready, determined. Jackson's heart swelled. She wasn't the same frightened girl from yesterday. She was standing tall, prepared to face the danger she had feared. The men sneered, confident in their numbers, but Jackson and Ayana held their ground. Jackson fired a warning shot into the air, the sound echoing across the plains. The men flinched, and Ayana swung her stick with a sharp crack, striking a rock near one of their boots. It startled them, forcing hesitation. Jackson realized then that this wasn't just about his skills. It was about their combined courage. Ayana's bravery gave him strength, just as his protection gave her confidence. Together they formed an unspoken bond, a unity that the men had not anticipated. "You'll never touch her," Jackson roared, his voice carrying across the clearing. Ayana lifted her chin, her eyes meeting the man's with fearless determination. She didn't flinch. She didn't cower. She was no longer just a victim. She was a fighter. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The men looked at each other, realizing the courage of the two standing against them was far greater than they expected. Slowly, hesitantly, they began to back away. Jackson's rifle stayed ready, his eyes never leaving them. Ayana's hands gripped her stick tightly, ready to defend herself if needed. Evenings were the quietest moments. They sat by the fire, sharing stories of the plains, the stars, and the people Jackson had met in his travels. He spoke of faraway towns, of kindness he had received and given, and of lessons learned the hard way. Ayana listened, eyes wide with wonder, soaking in every word. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, but not all hope is free from shadow. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jackson noticed her staring into the fire, her small fingers tracing patterns on the floor. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. I keep thinking about him," she whispered. "The man with the whip. What if he comes back?" Jackson's jaw tightened. He had expected this fear, and he knew it was valid. "We'll be ready," he said firmly. "And even if he does, he won't hurt you. Not ever again." "I promise," she nodded, though the fear lingered. Jackson reached out, taking her small hand in his. "You're not alone anymore, Ayana. You've got me. You've got this place. You've got your courage." Jack watched Naomi carefully. She was tending the fire, her hands steady despite the lingering chill. There was a softness in her movements now, a calm born from surviving the storm and the bandits. She had proven herself beyond measure, not just in skill, but in spirit. Jack realized he had grown to admire her courage, her sharp mind, and her fierce heart more than he had expected. She was extraordinary, a testament to the human will to survive and to rise stronger after every challenge. "You're very capable," Jack said softly, breaking the quiet. More than I realized last night. I respect that. Nayeli glanced up at him, her dark eyes meeting his in the flickering firelight. A small, almost shy smile curved her lips. I've had to be, she said. The world, it doesn't wait for anyone. You survive or you don't. Jack nodded, feeling a warmth beyond the fire. Yes, and you've survived. More than that, you've thrived. You've faced danger, cold, and fear, and you've stood your ground. That's why I trust you. Her smile deepened, touched with gratitude. I trust you too, she said softly. You saved me. Not just from the storm or the bandits, but from being alone. You make me feel safe. Jack felt his chest tighten. He had spent years on the frontier, surviving alone, relying only on skill and instinct. Yet now, with Nayeli by his side, he realized that safety was more than just avoiding danger. Safety was trust, warmth, and connection. She had awakened something in him that he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that he would survive, but hope that they could face the world together, and survive with purpose, with courage, with heart. The fire crackled between them, filling the quiet with its comforting warmth. Jack noticed how her eyes reflected the flames, how the faint blush on her cheeks caught the light, and how even in exhaustion, there was a fierce determination that made her beautiful, not in a fragile way, but in the strength and fire she carried inside. Do you ever get scared? He asked gently. Even now after everything? Nayeli hesitated, then nodded slightly. I do, she admitted. But fear, it doesn't stop me anymore. It tells me to be careful, to be ready. And now I'm not alone. That makes all the difference. Jack reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. You don't have to be alone, Nayeli. Not ever. I'll stay by your side. Through the cold, the danger, whatever comes next. Her eyes softened and she looked at him, a spark of something tender in her gaze. I'm glad you're here, she whispered. I never thought anyone would be. Jack's heart swelled. He had faced countless dangers on the frontier, but this, the trust, the quiet connection, the human spirit shining in her eyes, was more important than any battle, any storm, any survival skill. She had survived because of courage, yes, but she had thrived because someone believed in her, and he believed in her. The wind outside began to rise again, cold and insistent. Jack stood, adjusting his coat and checking their surroundings. We'll need to keep moving, he said. The frontier doesn't forgive hesitation. But tonight we rest. Tomorrow we face the next challenge together. Nayeli nodded, leaning closer to the fire. Together, she echoed, the word carrying both hope and determination. Hours passed as the night deepened. Jack kept watch, rifle in hand, while Nayeli slept lightly, curled in a blanket at the edge of the fire. He watched her face, illuminated by the flickering flames, and felt a protective warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She had become more than a companion. She had become a symbol of human courage, resilience, and the extraordinary spirit that refused to yield even in the harshest conditions. When she stirred, Jack reached out instinctively, brushing snow from her coat. Rest a little longer, he said gently. You've earned it. We've faced enough today. Nayeli opened her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze with quiet trust. I feel safer, she said softly. With you here, I feel like I can face anything. Jack's heart tightened. And you can, he said firmly, because you're strong, smart, and courageous, and you're not alone anymore. They stayed close by the fire, the cold outside pressing against the tent, but inside, warmth and trust held them safe. Jack realized that survival in the frontier wasn't just about skill. It was about human connection. Nayeli had reminded him of something he had long forgotten, that courage could be shared, trust could be built, and hearts could survive even when bodies were cold. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, Jack and Nayeli rose, preparing to move forward. Their bond had grown stronger, forged in the storm, the danger and the quiet moments of trust. Each step they took together was a testament to human endurance, courage, and the extraordinary strength that lay within both of them. Jack glanced at Nayeli, and she returned the look, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. They didn't need words. The frontier was harsh, unforgiving, and full of unknown dangers, but together they could face anything. Together they had survived. Together they would continue to thrive, and in that moment, beneath the rising sun, with the snow stretching endlessly before them, Jack knew something profound, the warmth between them, trust, Courage and admiration was stronger than any storm. Any danger, any frontier. Nayeli had survived because she was human. She had thrived because she believed in herself, and now because someone else believed in her too. Jack smiled faintly, a mix of pride and protectiveness. "We move forward," he said softly, "and nothing will stop us. Not the cold, not danger, not anything. Together we're unstoppable." Nayeli nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "Together," she said again, a promise and a vow. And as they packed their belongings and stepped out into the frozen plains, the firelight fading behind them, the world seemed a little less harsh, a little more conquerable. The frontier was still dangerous, the snow still deep and cold, but for Jack and Nayeli, there was something far stronger than the storm: courage, trust, and the extraordinary human spirit that refused to be broken. The morning sun rose over the endless plains, painting the snow in warm gold. Jack Lawson and Nayeli trudged carefully through the cold, their breath misting in the icy air. The storm had passed, the bandits were gone, yet the frontier remained wild and unforgiving. Every step they took was a test of endurance, of courage, and of trust. But Jack no longer feared the cold or the dangers ahead. He glanced at Nayeli walking beside him, her dark hair glinting in the sunlight, her eyes scanning the horizon with sharp intelligence. She had survived storms, bandits, and freezing nights, and yet she had emerged stronger, braver, and even more remarkable than before. Jack couldn't help but feel awe and admiration for her. She was human in the truest sense. Resilient, fierce, and unbroken. "You're amazing," Jack said softly, breaking the silence. "Not just for surviving, but for everything you are. Your mind, your heart, your courage. I've never met anyone like you." Nayeli turned her head slightly, a faint blush on her cheeks. "You really mean that?" she asked. Her voice carried a mixture of pride and vulnerability, the kind that only comes from someone who has been tested and truly seen. "I do," Jack replied firmly. "I've seen a lot in the frontier, Nayeli. But you've taught me something. Humans endure. Humans fight. Humans rise even when the world seems determined to crush them. You've shown me that." Her eyes softened, and for a moment they walked in silence, the cold air and vast expanse around them feeling less threatening, less lonely. Jack realized that it wasn't just the snow or the bandits that had made the nights terrifying. It was being alone in a harsh world. With Nayeli, fear had been replaced with trust. Danger had been tempered by courage, and cold had been softened by warmth, not the fire alone, but the warmth of shared survival and human connection. "You've changed me," Jack admitted quietly. "I've spent years surviving alone, trusting no one, but you remind me that people are worth trusting, worth protecting, worth fighting for." Nayeli's lips curved into a small smile, and she reached out, brushing a cold hand against his arm. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I was afraid, yes, but now I feel like I can face anything, not alone, but with you, together." Jack nodded, a lump in his throat. He had survived countless dangers, yet this bond, this trust, this acknowledgement of human spirit, was far more meaningful than any battle he had fought. Nayeli had survived the storm and the bandits, yes, but she had also survived loneliness, fear, and the crushing weight of uncertainty. And she had emerged radiant, courageous, and inspiring. The day wore on, and the plains stretched endlessly before them. They moved carefully, finding paths through snowdrifts and frozen streams. At times they paused to rest, sharing warmth and small pieces of food, their silent companionship as vital as any weapon. Each glance, each word, each gesture built the trust between them further. Jack realized that the frontier wasn't just about surviving. It was about honoring courage, resilience, and human connection. At one point, Nayeli stopped, gazing at a distant ridge. "I think I see something," she said. Maybe people. My village. Or what's left of it." Jack followed her gaze, spotting the faint outlines of smoke rising from the ridge. "Then we find them," he said softly. "Together." As they approached, the signs of devastation became clear. Trees were broken, fences toppled, and the snow bore the traces of struggle. But there were survivors, and they were struggling to rebuild, to reclaim what had been lost. The men hesitated, unsure how to respond to the combined courage of the cowboy and the young girl. Jackson fired a warning shot into the air, and Ayanna swung her stick, cracking it against a nearby rock. The sound echoed across the plain, startling the men. "You'll never touch her," Jackson shouted. Ayanna lifted her chin, meeting the man's glare without fear. The fire in her eyes made it clear. She was not a child to be bullied or controlled. The men exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected an easy target, but instead they faced a pair of unyielding opponents. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to retreat, disappearing into the grass and trees. Jackson lowered his rifle, his eyes never leaving them. Ayanna sank to the ground, exhausted but triumphant. Jackson knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You were incredible," he said quietly. I just wanted to help," she replied, her voice trembling with both fatigue and pride. Jackson smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. "You helped more than you know. You've shown real courage today, true courage. Not just fighting, but standing up for yourself, trusting yourself, and protecting what's important." The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. They repaired the fence, tended to the garden, and fed the animals. But a new sense of confidence had settled over Ayanna. She moved with purpose, her actions decisive, her mind alert. She had faced real danger and survived, not because Jackson had protected her alone, but because she had contributed, had stood her ground, and had made a difference. That evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Jackson and Ayanna sat on the cabin's porch. The sky was painted in shades of orange and violet, and the wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers and earth. Ayanna handed Jackson a small wooden carving she had made during the day. "For you," she said softly. "To remember today, to remember courage." Jackson took it, feeling a lump in his throat. It was more than a gift. It was a symbol of trust, bravery, and the bond they had formed. "I'll keep it always," he said. "And I'll never forget what you did today." Ayanna smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the fading light. I feel brave now, not just because of you, but because I know I can be." Jackson nodded. "That's how it works. Courage grows when you use it, when you act even when you're scared. You've learned that faster than most." They watched the stars appear one by one in the night sky, twinkling like distant fires of hope. The plains stretched endlessly beyond the cabin, wild and untamed, but inside they had found safety, trust, and a shared strength that nothing could break. Jackson realized something important that night. Ayanna hadn't just repaid him with gratitude. She had repaid him with bravery, with loyalty, and with the reminder that even the smallest person could make a huge difference. Saving her had been only the first step. Now together, they were shaping a future where fear no longer held power over them. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying a promise of more challenges to come. Jackson knew that the men might return, more determined than ever. But he also knew that Ayanna was no longer the girl who had been tied to a post. She was strong, she was brave, and she was ready to face the world with him. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, Jackson looked at Ayanna, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. She had faced danger, stood tall, and shown courage beyond her years, and he knew with certainty that together, they could face whatever trials the plains had in store. In that moment, he understood a truth he had always known, but rarely felt so deeply. Bravery isn't just about facing the world. It's about finding someone to stand beside you, someone whose courage inspires your own. And in Ayanna, he had found not just a companion, but a kindred spirit, a young soul who had taught him as much about courage as he had taught her. The night was silent now, save for the crackling of the fire and the soft breathing of Ayanna as she rested against him. The stars above seemed to watch over them, tiny guardians in a vast, wild world. Jackson smiled faintly, feeling the weight of the day and the promise of tomorrow. The plains were wide, dangerous, and full of uncertainty, but together he and Ayanna were ready. They were no longer just surviving. They were living, growing stronger and proving that courage, trust, and kindness could shine even in the harshest lands. And in that quiet cabin under the endless sky, two hearts beat with a shared determination to protect, to endure, and to face whatever came next together. The next morning, the plains were calm, almost deceptively peaceful. The sunlight spilled across the cabin, turning the wooden walls golden and warming the air. Jackson had been awake for hours, tending to the horses and checking the perimeter. His instincts told him the danger hadn't passed. The cruel man and his men were out there somewhere, and sooner or later they would return. Ayanna stirred on the porch, rubbing her eyes and stretching. She had been restless all night, dreaming of the past, of fear, and of being powerless. But now she felt a strength inside her she hadn't known existed. A fire that told her she could face anything, as long as she wasn't alone. "Morning, Ayana," Jackson greeted, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Morning," she said, her voice stronger than usual. She picked up the small stick he had given her and twirled it absently. Do you think they'll come back?" Jackson studied her, seeing both concern and courage in her gaze. "Maybe," he said honestly. "But no matter what happens, we'll face it together. You've grown so much, Ayana. You're brave, and I'll be right beside you." Ayana's chest swelled with pride. She had learned to care for the cabin, the horses, and herself. Every day she felt more confident, more capable. But courage, she knew, was more than work. It was action, standing up when fear came knocking at the door. The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound from the distant trees. Jackson stiffened. "They're close," he whispered. Ayana's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she moved closer to Jackson, ready to face whatever was coming. The men emerged from the tree line, more determined than before. The same cruel man led them, his eyes burning with anger, his followers following silently like wolves stalking their prey. Jackson stepped in front of Ayana, his rifle at the ready. "Not a step closer," he said firmly. The leader sneered. "She belongs to us," he spat. "You think a lone cowboy and a child can stop us?" Ayana stood tall beside Jackson. "She's not yours," Jackson shouted. But then Ayana spoke, her voice clear, strong, and unwavering. "And I'm not afraid of you." Jackson felt a surge of pride and awe. She wasn't just repeating lessons. She was acting with her own courage. She gripped the stick tightly, planting her feet firmly on the ground. The men hesitated, uncertain. They had expected fear, hesitation, weakness. Instead, they faced a small girl standing side by side with a determined cowboy, ready to fight for herself and for what was right. One of the men lunged forward, but Jackson moved quickly, blocking him with the rifle. Ayana swung her stick with precision, hitting a rock near one of the men's boots. The clattering sound startled them, forcing hesitation. Together, they formed a wall of courage and determination, an unbreakable bond that the men could not penetrate. Jackson fired another warning shot, this time into the ground. Dust flew and the men staggered backward. Ayana's eyes never left them. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't running. She was standing tall, a young girl who had transformed fear into bravery. The confrontation stretched for tense moments, each side waiting for the other to make a mistake. Then slowly the men began to retreat. They turned and disappeared into the trees, defeated not by numbers or weapons, but by the courage and unity of Jackson and Ayana. After the danger had passed, Ayana sank to the ground, exhausted but triumphant. Jackson knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I just wanted to help," she said, panting. "No," Jackson replied, shaking his head. "You did more than help. You showed bravery. You stood up when you were scared. You fought alongside me. That's real courage, Ayana." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of pride and accomplishment. She had faced danger, stood tall, and proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. That evening, as the sun dipped low, they worked together to repair the cabin doors and reinforce the fences. Every action was deliberate, every movement careful, as if they were preparing for any threat the plains might bring. Jackson noticed how confident Ayana had become. She moved with purpose, her mind alert, her hands steady. "You've changed," he said softly. "In just a few days, you've gone from scared to brave, from unsure to confident." "I'm proud of you, Ayana," she smiled faintly. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Jackson shook his head gently. "No, you could have done it without me. I just gave you a place to start. But the courage, that came from you." They sat together by the fire, the flames casting a warm glow over the cabin. Ayana handed Jackson the small carved token she had made during the day, a reminder of courage, a symbol of their trust, and a sign of her growth. "I want you to keep it," she said softly, "to remember today." Jackson took it, feeling a lump in his throat. "I will," he whispered, "and I'll never forget what you taught me today. That bravery isn't about size or age, it's about heart." The stars appeared above, twinkling against the deep blue sky. The plains stretched endlessly, wild and untamed, yet inside the cabin there was warmth, safety, and hope. Jackson looked at Ayana, her small frame illuminated by the firelight, and realized that she had repaid him in a way he had never expected. She had given him courage, pride, and the knowledge that even the smallest soul could change the outcome of a fight. The night was quiet except for the wind whispering through the trees and the soft crackle of the fire. Jackson felt a deep sense of peace. They had faced danger together and they had emerged stronger. The bond between them had deepened into something unbreakable, a partnership forged in trust, bravery, and shared hardship. Ayanna leaned against Jackson, exhausted but content. I feel strong now, she said softly. I think I can face anything. Jackson smiled, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You can, and you will. You're stronger than you know, Ayanna, and I'll be right here beside you. In that moment, the cabin felt like the safest place in the world. The plains outside were vast, dangerous, and full of uncertainty, but inside, courage and trust had created a sanctuary. Together, they were no longer simply surviving. They were thriving, growing stronger and proving that even in the harshest lands, bravery and kindness could shine. Jackson realized something profound that night. He had saved her once, yes, but she had saved him in return, through trust, bravery, and the unspoken bond that had formed between them. The world was harsh and the future uncertain, but together, they could face anything. And under the quiet stars, with the fire crackling softly, Jackson knew one truth above all: courage isn't given, it's built. It grows when someone believes in you, when someone stands beside you, and when fear is faced head-on. Ayanna had learned that, and in doing so, had changed both of their lives forever. The plains were quiet that morning, the sun rising slowly over the horizon and painting the world in shades of gold and orange. Jackson and Ayanna moved together through the cabin yard, finishing the chores they had started the night before. The air was crisp and filled with the smell of dew and fresh grass. There was a sense of calm, yet both knew that peace on the plains was often temporary. Ayanna carried water to the garden, her small hands steady, her posture confident. She had changed so much in the past days. Fear no longer ruled her. Courage had taken its place, and it was as natural to her as breathing. Jackson watched her, feeling a deep pride swelling in his chest. She had not only survived, she had grown into someone strong, brave, and capable. Ready for today? Jackson asked, his voice calm but alert. Ayanna nodded, her dark eyes shining with determination. Yes, whatever comes, I can handle it. Jackson smiled. Good. Because sometimes courage isn't about fighting, it's about facing what you can't predict. They had barely spoken the words when the sound of hooves thundered across the plains. Jackson's heart tightened. He already knew who it was. The cruel man and his men had returned, more determined than ever, likely seeking revenge. Stay close, Jackson whispered to Ayanna. Remember everything we've practiced. Ayanna nodded, gripping the stick tightly. But this time she wasn't trembling. She was ready. She had learned to trust herself, to trust Jackson, and to stand up even when the odds seemed impossible. The men emerged from the trees, eyes filled with anger and greed. She's coming with us, the leader shouted. Jackson stepped in front of Ayanna, rifle ready. Not a chance, he said firmly. Ayanna's voice joined his, strong and unwavering. I'm not afraid of you. The men hesitated, shocked by the boldness of the small girl standing beside the cowboy. Jackson could see their uncertainty, their disbelief. They had expected fear. They had expected weakness. Instead, they faced courage, a courage that could not be broken by threats or violence. The leader lunged forward, but Jackson moved swiftly, blocking him. Ayanna swung her stick with precision, striking a rock near one of the man's feet. The clatter startled them, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. Jackson fired a shot into the ground, sending dust flying. Go back, he shouted. Leave now and you'll live to tell the story. Ayanna stepped forward, her small voice carrying across the plains. We're not afraid of you. You can't take me. Her words were more powerful than any weapon. The men faltered, unsure how to respond. Courage had created a force they hadn't anticipated. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to retreat, disappearing into the distant trees. Jackson kept his rifle raised until they were out of sight and then lowered it, relief washing over him. Ayanna sank to the ground, exhausted but triumphant. Jackson knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You were amazing, he said, voice thick with emotion. I just wanted to help, she said softly, though her eyes reflected pride and strength. Jackson shook his head. No, Ayanna. You did more than help. You stood tall. You fought with courage. You showed strength even when fear tried to take over. That's bravery. Ayanna's lips trembled and tears sprang to her eyes. But they were not tears of fear. They were tears of victory, of pride, and of newfound confidence. She had faced danger and survived. She had stood strong beside someone who believed in her, and she had realized that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. As the sun climbed higher, they repaired the fences, tended to the garden, and cared for the animals. Every task was done with purpose, each moment a reminder of how far Ayanna had come. Jackson watched her with quiet admiration. She was no longer a child defined by fear. She was a young person defined by courage, strength, and determination. That evening they sat by the fire on the cabin porch. Ayanna handed Jackson a small token she had carved during the day, a symbol of bravery, trust, and the bond they had formed. Keep it, she said softly. To remember everything we've faced together. Jackson held it close, feeling a lump in his throat. I will, he whispered. And I'll never forget what you've taught me. Courage doesn't come from size or age, it comes from heart. You've shown me that, Ayanna. The sky turned deep blue, stars twinkling above like tiny flames of hope. The plains stretched endlessly, wild and untamed. But inside the cabin, there was warmth, safety, and the knowledge that together, they could face anything. Jackson realized that saving Ayanna had been only the beginning. She had repaid him, not just with gratitude but with courage, loyalty, and trust. And in doing so, she had changed him as well. She had reminded him that the world could be faced bravely, that fear could be overcome, and that even the smallest person could leave a powerful mark on the world. Ayanna leaned against Jackson, exhausted but content. I feel strong now, she said softly. I think I can face anything. Jackson smiled, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. You can, and you will. You're stronger than you know, and no matter what comes, I'll be right here beside you. The night deepened, the fire crackling softly as they sat in quiet companionship. The plains outside remained vast and unpredictable, but inside the cabin there was safety, hope, and the unbreakable bond of two lives touched by courage, kindness, and trust. Jackson thought about the future. He knew the world could still be harsh and challenges would come, but he also knew that they were ready. Ayanna had learned bravery, resilience, and the power of standing up for what is right. And together they had created something extraordinary, a bond that could not be broken, a partnership forged in shared trials, and a sanctuary built from trust and courage. The night air was filled with the soft sounds of life, the wind through the trees, the quiet of the animals, and the subtle rhythm of two hearts beating with quiet determination. Jackson and Ayanna had faced fear, danger, and cruelty, and they had emerged stronger, braver, and more connected than ever. For the first time in years, Jackson felt a deep sense of peace. He had saved a life, yes, but in doing so, he had discovered something more powerful. The strength of courage, the value of trust, and the extraordinary impact of helping another soul rise above fear. Ayanna had come to his cabin to repay him, and she had done so in a way he had never expected. Not with money, not with words, but with courage, loyalty, and an unshakable spirit. She had proven that even in the harshest lands, humanity, the goodness, bravery, and compassion of one person could shine brighter than any darkness. As they sat under the endless starry sky, Jackson realized the truth. The plains would always be wild and dangerous, but courage, trust, and kindness were stronger than fear. Together they had faced what seemed impossible. And together, they would face whatever the world had left in store. Ayanna smiled faintly, resting her head on Jackson's shoulder. Thank you, she whispered. Jackson hugged her gently. No, Ayanna. Thank you. You've shown me what true bravery looks like, and you've reminded me why humanity, courage, kindness, and love can change everything. The fire burned low, the stars shone brightly, and the plains stretched far into the distance. Two lives once touched by fear and hardship had found each other. And in each other they had found courage, hope, and a new beginning. The world outside was still wild, still unpredictable, but inside, in that quiet cabin on the open plains, humanity had won.